I'm very excited to be here. My name is Egwuenu. I currently work as a developer advocate at Cloudflare. And in today's talk, I'm going to be talking to you about how to build serverless applications on the edge using Cloudflare Pages. Oh, that's me. Yeah, matching the Cloudflare logo. In this talk, I'm going to go through what serverless is, but Jasper already did justice to that, so I'll just breeze through it. That was a great explanation, by the way. And then I'll go through Cloudflare's network, because something that I've found, a lot of people would believe Cloudflare as a security company, mostly because they don't know we offer serverless services. So I'll talk briefly about Cloudflare's network at a glance, and then go into the developer ecosystem at Cloudflare, the offerings we have, Cloudflare Workers, Pages, and other services as well. And then we'll do a short demo of what you can build at the edge. Cool, so let's get started. Serverless, I'm sure pretty much everyone knows that they are actual servers, right? They are servers that you don't have to provision yourself, essentially. So back then, you would have to spin up your own servers, monitor it, make sure that there's no downtime. But the essence of serverless is now you don't have to manage that. As front-end developers, you only need to just focus on writing your front-end code while you've set all of that to a service provider, right? So yeah, they're still servers. And moving from serverless to the edge in this case are still serverless functions. There is a bit of thing there where people ask, what's the difference, right? The difference here is the edge is servers that are located closest to you. Serverless functions functions that are deployed to an origin server located in a specific location, right? So for example, you have a server in Amsterdam or US East or London or somewhere. Those are servers located in different locations, and when you deploy your functions, they're hosted there. But the difference compared to edge functions is that you have servers, in this case, CDNs, located across the globe, and your functions are deployed across all of these CDNs. So the essence is then, as a user, your application is accessible to, or as a developer, your application is accessible to everyone regardless of where they're located. And this is currently Cloudflare's edge network. All the dark blue spots you see there are actual CDNs that are located across the globe. So essentially, the edge is server that's geographically located closest to your end users. And in this case, I already can see the essential reason why people would want to use this. So imagine a scenario where you're building an application, right? You're located in the US, and you have most of your users somewhere in Africa, for example, and you're building your application on using serverless functions. Now, it's great for them, but it's unfortunate because they might be located where their server is quite far from them. So at the end of the day, they would have low latency when they try to access your applications. But in this case, if you have your application deployed to edge servers, then it's accessible to everyone regardless of where you're located. So yeah, serverless on the edge. And with that, I'll like to introduce you to Cloudflare's global network. Currently, we have, like I said, several CDNs deployed across several locations. Right now, there are over 275 at this time, which is great because, of course, it makes your application accessible. We have over 25 million internet properties. This is a lot of stats, so I'll just breeze through them and go on to the actual thing that you might be interested in, which is the developer ecosystem. As front-end developers, we are always going to be looking for what services are out there that will help our work easier or give us make us productive in this case. And I'd like to introduce you to the developer ecosystem at Cloudflare. We currently offer different services that would allow you build on the edge. One of them is Cloudflare Workers, right? So Cloudflare Workers is our offering for you to build functions on the edge, right? Serverless workers are serverless functions that allows you build your application on the edge. The great thing with workers is that we have something called bundled workers that allows you to, gives you more because typically functions are timed at a specific runtime, so you can't run them across above a certain time limit. And with bundled workers, which is of course paid, you get more time and more resources added to your plan if you are using workers bundled. And another great thing with workers is you get a certain amount of requests free for the first, I think you get 100,000 requests for free before you can now, if you find that you're building more applications and you're going across the time limits that you get, then you can move on to a paid plan. That's right about computes and workers, but we also have several different offerings as well, spanning across data storage and developer services. So for data storage, I find that a lot of people are happy to move to serverless functions. They are happy to build their applications on the server. But what about where do you store your data, essentially? That's another problem, or I would say a thing that developers have to put in mind, because it's great if you have your server deployed to the edge. It's duplicated across several servers, and your database is still in one location, right? So if someone is trying to access your site, they'll still experience low latency because, of course, data is served from a different server. But yeah, at Cloudflare, we have several different data storage options that would allow you move your data to the edge. One of them I'll talk to you about today is called Workers KV. It's a key value storage for storing data on the edge. We also have others like durable objects, the cache API, R2, and yeah, those are like several different options you get to build your application, included with data on the edge. But today's talk is mostly focused on Cloudflare Pages, and that is essentially a different service that allows you to deploy your static website to Cloudflare's network. More on that later, but if anyone here has used Cloudflare Pages for deploying their websites, can I see your hands? Okay, that's a lot. That's good. Okay, I would like to go through what Cloudflare Pages gives you as a developer and how you can take it one step further by building dynamic front-end applications coupled with Pages functions. So before I move into that, Workers, I talked about Workers already. Workers is the serverless offering we give to you. The great thing about Workers is you can build your Workers application regardless of the language that you choose to. So you can write your functions in JavaScript, TypeScript, C++, Rust, if that's your choice of language. But I believe most of us here are front-end developers, so default to be TypeScript or JavaScript. But the great thing is Workers can compile to, you can use different languages and it compiles back to WASM, WebAssembly. Another important feature of Workers is how you can integrate the other services that Cloudflare offers you, like the data offering services that I explained, that I called out earlier. You can also integrate that into your Workers application. And you have browsers API included in your Workers, so you do things like you get services like request or the response API for you to work with your Workers. This is a typical example of a worker on the edge. This is essentially a JavaScript functions that exports using the fetch API, returns a response to the browser, right? This is the syntax for if you're going to be using a worker. Now keep this in mind because I'll show you something different in coming slides. Now, Pages is essentially a different service that allows you to deploy your front-end applications to the edge. The additional thing here I like to call out is it's not just you deploying your front-end application, it's also you deploying your full-stack application. Something I'm finding right now with how the web is evolving is front-end developers are kind of getting to a point where they call themselves full-stack developers because you're also tasked with also working with some back-end related things like you're working on building serverless functions, right, and all of that stuff. So Pages allows you to deploy your static website, but not just that, it takes it one step further to allow you to deploy your full stack application. Some features of Pages that I love is it has Git integration, meaning that you can push your code to GitHub and it auto-generates deployments for you once you have created your Pages project on Cloudflare Pages, essentially. So you have automatic build and deploy hooks set up. It also has like automatic CI/CD integrated into your project. So if you're working with Vue, Next, React, any of this, and you have it deployed to Cloudflare Pages, and you're working with like a CI/CD integration in your application, so you could set up CI/CD easily. Another great thing with working with Pages is automatic preview links. We all love it when we set up a PR and you have like a link to preview what you've changed. This is also helpful when you're working with a team of developers because you can, of course, share the changes that you've made with them live without them having to clone down the branch that you've worked on. Another great thing with Pages is the integration with other Cloudflare's products. So you can integrate efficiently with Assess, Web Analytics. If you're using Web Analytics in your application, you have easy integration to other products. And also you get free SSL if you have your application deployed to Pages. And finally, you can now add dynamic content into your Cloudflare Pages project. Introducing functions, Pages functions, like I like to call it. So let me take you a bit back. Cloudflare Pages, static website application that allows you to deploy a static website. Then on top of that, you have Pages functions, right? So it allows you also deploy the serverless functions directly in your Pages project. Typically, what we've seen before is people are using Pages and they want to add dynamic functionalities into the application. Now they end up creating a separate application, which is a worker, and then they have that running side by side. Now that is great, but imagine you have several different applications and then you have to always create a worker. Managing two different things, two different applications at the same time can become, it's not a great developer experience essentially. So we've seen that a lot of people, a lot of developers are interested in using Cloudflare workers in their front-end application. Why not just bring it over to them? So that is what Pages functions essentially is. Under the hood, it's a Cloudflare worker. But the great thing is you can have it running directly inside your application. This is an example of a Noxt project that I have. And essentially to get Pages functions working in your application, you only need to create a functions directory. In this example, I have a functions directory, and I also created an additional directory called API because I'm trying to mimic an API that I'm writing in this example, but that's not required. Now, I showed you an example of what a Cloudflare worker syntax looks like. Now, this is a Pages functions application, right? The difference here is, of course, the parameters I've passed into it, and also the request handlers that you get. So it's kind of similar. You just need to know that with Pages functions, you need to pass in an on-request handler. I'll talk about that more in a bit, but you also have additional parameter passed from the context, like the data next for middlewares, and the rest are also APIs that you get out of Cloudflare workers. But those are the two additional parameters you get out of context. Sorry, I can't see my computer, but it's fine. Yeah, so this is an example of a Pages functions, right? And yeah, this is just outlining it properly. When you're working with any Cloudflare products, so workers or Pages, we have a CLI that allows you to work efficiently with any of these products, and it's called Wrangler. So Wrangler is our command line tooling, and with your Pages functions, if you're running it, you also have a Wrangler command to help you work locally. So for example, if you have a Noxt project and you've written a function inside of your Noxt project to have it run locally, you'd use the command Wrangler pages dev and then the name of the directory that you've added your functions into. This is great because you can run your function locally Also passing the build command would also push your function directly to pages, right? So we have integration with Wrangler to help you work seamlessly locally. Now, you might be asking, why do I need this if I already have workers, right? We've seen that functions are great. These are some use cases that are great for working with functions in your application. You can use it to store data, connect to third-party APIs. If you're working in a front-end application and you need to do things like caching data on the edge or working with headless CMS, you can also just do this directly in your Pages functions, or essentially any use case that would allow you to add dynamic functionality into your application. You can use you can use Pages for it. And one extra thing that we added to the integration of Pages functions is called plugins, right? Plugins essentially are taking functions one step further by allowing people build already functional application functions that you can now deploy as a package to use inside of your functions. Just before I go into packages, plugins, I want to quickly talk about request handlers. Like I mentioned earlier, the difference between the syntax of a worker and a Pages functions is that you have to call an on-request handler. Now, the thing here is you can use on-request for any of your function, or specify if it's a post request, a put, a get request by using a specific request handler. So if I'm writing a function that is supposed to be a post request to an API of some sort, then I would typically use the on-request post handler. So these are some options that you have if you're working with Pages functions. Yeah, going back to plugins, like I said, plugins are an extra added functionality on top of Pages that allows you to build a library. So if you find that you've created a plugin, you've created a function that does essentially the same thing, like for example, you have a function for doing authentication, and you have different applications that you probably need the authentication function on, you can then put that into a plugin and have that be used in several of your applications. Currently, we've seen examples. We've also created different types of plugins for people to use if you're working with Pages. There is a plugin that allows you to intercept HTML pages and inject, third-party script into them. So, for example, if you have a lot of people have integrations with Google Analytics, for example. So, instead of writing your own function to do that, you can use a plugin called Google Analytics plugin directly in your Pages. We've also seen examples of people using it for authentication and adding authorization headers to the application. Examples with also headless CMS. When you're writing, when you're building an application and you have to add an headless CMS, and you have several other applications that you need to do the same setup for, you can also create a plugin to enable you to do that efficiently across all of your front-end applications that you're building with Pages. These are some examples of Pages plugins that we currently have built for the community to use. We have the Cloudflare Access plugin, a GraphQL plugin, Sentry plugin, if you're doing things with Sentry. Essentially, this is great because, I find that this is great because it takes away a lot of work from the developers, right? So if you're working with any of these things, any of these libraries, essentially what you need to do is install the plugin into your front-end application, and you already have that working out of the box. Now, moving away from Cloudflare Pages functions, what about when you have to work with data in your application? And that's when I then bring up the several different data options that you have to choose between when you're working with any Cloudflare developer product. So you have KV. Cloudflare KV is a key value storage that allows you to add data or insert data into your application. We have a cache API for also storing your data as a cache on the edge. There's also durable objects, R2, which is a blob storage database, and D1, which is a SQL database. And for this talk, I'll just show you an example of how to work with KV. So like I said, KV is a key value storage. The great thing about KV is it caches your data across the several CDNs that we have. It also supports high read volumes. So if you have an application and you are fetching data consistently from it, KV could be a good use case for you because all your data, in this case that we stored, are cached across several different CDNs, which you can essentially pull when needed with low latency. And yeah, with that, I'll just show you a quick demo of how some of this works in a Nox application. This will be interesting. I have to lean in. Great. Okay, so here I have a Nox application, and I created a functions directory in here. So I have different examples I could show you. The first example I have here is a request to an API endpoint. And in this example, I'm essentially sending an API request to an API that fetches country's data. Here I have two things to take note of. The first is with functions. With a pages function, you get a context object, and out of the context object can I point to this? No. Out of the context object, you can pull off the specific user's location. So you have like a country data that you can take from the context. And what I'm doing here in this example is I'm checking where the person visiting this or running this API is from, and I'm taking that information and I'm serving specific data about the country that they are located in. So in this case, if the country code of the user is the Netherlands, it should fetch some Netherlands-related data for the user, and then I'm using this API directly in the Nox application. I can run that to see. I'm running the Nox app. Okay, this is me running the API, and I'm using the Wrangler command, but I added that in the script so it's easy for me to easily run the API using npm run API. But in this case, if I open this in the browser and go to the routes/API/country, in order for you to access the specific function that you're running, you can access it directly from your browser using the name of the function that you've written. So mine is called country. It's called country, right? Yeah. Country, yeah, thank you. I can't see. Yeah, okay, there you go. Yeah, so this fetches data about the Netherlands. So in this case, if you have a front-end application and you need to work with third-party APIs, you can use the pages functions directly inside of your Nox application. That's one example. And another example I'd like to show you is actually using KV. And I mentioned that KV is a key value storage. So if you have to save data somewhere, you could as well use KV storage for it. But keep in mind that the thing with KV is you can read data frequently from it, but writing data to it would take time because it has to propagate across the several different servers, CDNs that are located across different locations. So just keep that in mind when you're working with KV. So in this example here, I have some redirects, and I'm saving those redirects. So this redirect object, I'm saving that to a KV storage. And then when I navigate to a specific route, using the key of each of those objects, it should redirect me to the specific websites that I've assigned it to. But the good thing here is I've saved this to KV. I'll show you that code right here. So on line 18, to work with KV, you can either put data or fetch data or put get or list data from the database. And here I'm putting the routes object into KV, and in the second function here, I'm essentially pulling it with the key to fetch the specific website. And this is my, that's it. Sorry. This is my KV storage here. I've run this previously, so I'll just show you essentially what I have there. So I already ran this command before, so it takes the objects that I've written and pushed that to KV. Now, in order for me to try and see if this works, I will run, sorry, this is it. I would run the KV redirects route. So in this case, KV, hope I spell this correctly. And in order for me to make this work, in the code, I said it should only work if I add the query parameters to it, the name of the key as a query parameter. So here becomes, I'll try workers. Oops. And KV, that's what I should run. KV. Yeah. The reason is because I was running that without actually calling the KV namespace that I've pushed, so it won't work, of course. So now it should work. Yeah. So what essentially happened there is it did the redirect without you knowing, because in this case, I'm using the response object from, I'm using the response.redirect object to actually do the redirect, as you can see here. Here. Yeah, so those are like quite quick demos I could show you on how to actually use Pages functions directly inside of your front-end application. So you can take this, couple steps further. You can do more stuff with this. Examples that I've seen or that I've done is I have a front-end application and I'm pulling data from my headless CMS in this case, and I'm using it for like a blog, and I've seen other use cases for this. So if you're thinking about how do I quickly spin up Edge function directly in your website, then a go-to recommendation is to try out Pages functions. Think of it as a worker directly in your front-end application in this case. So yeah, that's pretty much what I would show you for this talk. I'll just go back to my slide quickly. And I recommend you reading the docs just so that you learn more about how to get it to work. I explained it further in this talk, but if you'd like to learn more about how to integrate Pages plugins or how to get it to work with, for example, another data storage like R2 or D1 in this case, I recommend reading the docs. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you'd like to learn more, the documentation's my first go-to recommendation. We also have like a Discord community if you like to join, so you could ask questions or any of that. That's also a good resource for you. Yeah, so if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to take that now.